And we're in.
All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lunge Lift podcast. Today, we are rejoined by a very special guest, Mr. Jamie Lau. We're going to be talking all things CrossFit Open. We're in the midst of it now. And we look forward to getting some top tips on how to prepare and execute for open workouts, as well as some trivia and interesting facts about Opens past and present. Jamie, thanks for coming back. Welcome. How are you, mate?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Glad to be here. With the timing of it was literally, this is probably about 3 hours. Well, I got up quite early this morning, but the workout's just been released, which is quite an exciting time. I think the buzz around the Open is cool. And thanks for having me because, I have been around the block, even though I haven't been doing the Open recently. I've definitely seen and competed in a lot of Opens. I think my first full one was 2014. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun chat. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. And so 21.2, repeat of 17.1. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's quite easy because I did a lot of thoughts on this, and I think Ashes was your first. This is your Open that you did?
No, it's my second
2016.
one.
2016 was the first one. Okay.
Yeah.
And back then, I was really in the midst of it, programming for a gym and really trying to help people. And I think I probably watched over 100 people do this workout, regardless of repeats or not. And I think the biggest thing that I saw was, if you remember, in terms of the Open history, this is the first time burpee box jump overs were in, and the first time ever there was a dumbbell. So if you're new to CrossFit, just realize that things change all the time. We'll talk about 21.1, in a second, but this was new then. So I think the scores here won't represent exactly what's going to happen now. I think watching the two guys go Open live, I watched it this morning, and it's crazy. So if you think about it, who was it? Medeiros went basically 10 minutes. He went 2 minutes faster than he did way back when, 3 years ago, whatever, when it got released. He was 18 at the time, so that's fair enough. But just look at the separation. They were both top 5 at the games, right? Samuel Kwan. There was a 2-minute separation between them. So if you think about the leaderboard and what this means, if it's doing that to the elite, it's definitely going to do that to your average person. And that's what I saw massively when people did this workout. Some people would finish and some people were nowhere near finishing because of a multitude of things. But being able to move efficiently with a dumbbell overhead was a big limiter for loads. I was watching people literally, it's like a 1RM, snatch, wobbling, trying to stand it up, paired with a burpee, right, that is also loading of that shoulder, was just a really interesting thing. So I think if you've never done this workout, it's really humbling. And everything that you think is slightly weak, a bit like when the overhead lunges came out with the dumbbell or with the barbell, those things just hit you. And with the ascending rep scheme as well, I kind of wrote down, I did it last when I released it. When you get to the 40 dumbbell snatches, right, it goes 10, 15, 20, 15, 30, 15. You think you're kind of your way through it. When you get to the 40, you haven't even gone through half of the reps. You've done 105 reps and you've got 120 more to go. So just have a little gut check there. If you think you're going to finish in the 15-minute time cap and you're halfway through the time, you're not going to do it. I promise you, because doing it with less breaks in between does not get easier. Cumulative fatigue does not get easier. And I watch people being like, because they base their pacing off a 15-minute time cap, and it's just incorrect. You need to see it as a 15-minute AMRAP that you're not going to finish. Otherwise, you're going to get to the round of 40 dumbbell snatches, and you'll literally be doing them as 2, rest 10 seconds, 2, rest 10 seconds. So unless you're going to be elite, and think about those guys, Samuel Kwan did it in 12 minutes, right? So I looked at some of the scores, a 5,000th score, right, was sub 14, right, in the world, right? And that is, in terms of the Open, the top 2.5%, right, that did that. So you've got to be in the top 3% of the world, roughly, to finish this workout. So, I just want people to realize, obviously people are going to get better, the field changes. They changed I don't know what the actual standard is with where you can change the dumbbell. It looked like watching the elite, you can change it overhead now, right? Because they changed that, because before, then you have to change it below the shoulder, I believe, after that year. Yeah. Now they've changed it again. So small things like that, I think, make a really, really big difference.
all I remember from this workout was I think, my first full open. I played around with the 2016 Open, but this was my first like inner box open. And this workout, wooden boxes as well. So I did it at Shakespeare's. So we're just getting into it. And obviously the whole new thing about dumbbells, no one really knows how to dumbbell snatch. It was just a lot of bending over from the lower back, blowing out. And so I remember, because I think back then it had a 20-minute time cap, I think. And
this actually might have a 20, to be fair. Maybe I was thinking of the double under wall walks. Actually, it is 20. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So with this, so I remember doing this, and I think I got it in, I think it was like under 17 or something like that the first time. And that exactly what you said there, realizing how far you've still got to go when you get to 40. And for me, obviously being a bigger guy, burpees were like, and especially, it was awful. But I love it because I've got a vlog of it, and like watching back at it is so much fun. And then I remember them redoing it on the Monday, back still blown up and not getting any faster because I was in so much pain. And it was one of those workouts which at the time, it just we should just go once and go for that, because especially when you're not conditioned. But when I now think about it, me and Ash quickly spoke about this before, and it's like how throwing around a 22.5 kilo dumbbell now, it's just nothing. It's literally don't get me wrong, 50 dumbbell snatches is still exhausting. But I think that for me in my head, that's where the workout would start, in a way, like the late 40s, 50. It's but that's because I've done that many over time, and I'm not obviously one of the elite still. But what a workout.
Yeah, this was especially humbling for me because I had just had my appendix out and hadn't done any lifting for 6 weeks, and this is the first session back, and I was weak, fat, and especially unfit.
Unconditioned.
Yeah, and it was not a lot of fun.
I think what's interesting, if you're someone who has been CrossFitting for, let's say, 2-3 years, that lower back pump and pain. I had a coach at the time, Max Harsh, and he literally said to me, you have to push through that if you want a good score. Your lower back's going to pump, but actually he was like, you're not going to injure yourself. If you've done 150 deadlifts right in a workout, then this dumbbell snatch, yes, it's lower, yes, it's single loaded, whatever. He's like, if it starts to pump, great, but that's an indicator of you going fast, and you've actually got to use that as your cue that you're actually going to do well. And you've got to perceive that. For your best score, you've got to perceive that actually 150 dumbbell snatches with extension in the burpee box jump, don't get me wrong, which is really taxing on the lower back as well, that coming up, and the more you snake, and but when it comes down to it, if you think about, if you did Diane really fast at 100 kilos, that's 45 reps. If you've done enough training in kettlebell swings and whatever, you're not going to injure yourself. That was the biggest thing. When people feel that lower back pump, often they think they're going to injure themselves. And if you're 2, 3, 4 years into training, or you've been training for a while, like yourself, Rob, and you've done deadlifts and hinge work, the likelihood is that the pain will get to a tolerance and it will just stay. And unfortunately, you'll be breathing hard and you'll want to stop and say that it's your lower back. But let's be honest, you finish the workout and 4 days later, you're probably fine, right? But at the time, you're like, oh no, my lower back's going to get injured. You're like, no, it's not. Like, you're saying that because it's really blown up and so much blood flows there. But ultimately, if you push through that pain, and trust me, I'm not one to tell people to do that, but you should do it.
I think for those that haven't done it, I think that's a really good point to take away. Would you be able to also maybe give some insights into the two movements themselves, and maybe some tips for especially like the burpees, especially being like a bigger guy, maybe if you're good at burpees, if you're not, like what may be some of the things that you say, especially to a newbie that hasn't done this before?
Yeah, so I think just burpee box jump technique itself, it's so variable for you. If you're bad at lifting your knee towards your chest, right, hip flexion is difficult for you. Stepping up and stepping down, you might think about alternating your legs or not stepping up, because actually lots of people, their lower back find that difficult to actually bring your knee into your chest, and it flexes that lumbar spine and then extends it. So actually having your feet wide and kind of jumping might be better for you, and using more of your upper body to save your lower back. Obviously that might mean your shoulders are fried to be able to snatch, but it's one of those things where it's a coupled workout where you have to think about where your limiters are. For me, found it really useful to rest at the top of the box. I literally burpee jumped and I stood there and then turn. And if I rested too much on like standing after I jumped, I just would take too long. But me being on the box, I just felt like you're in the middle of the movement. So you can't stand here for 10 seconds, right? But it was just part of my cycle. I turned on the box and just jumped back. I couldn't step. If I step down, right, if it's loads of box jumps, I have to step down. But actually that hurts my hips because I don't have that range easily. So for me, turning right to the edge of the box and then jumping back and then letting myself drop was working better, right? But it does massively defend. And for me, I knew if I stopped on the dumbbell snatches, I basically made my transitions bigger and didn't allow my cycle times to really change because I knew I'm not great at managing my rest periods once I let go of something. But for lots of people, I think just doing a few and then breathing, because most people can't breathe at the bottom of the burpee or at the bottom of a dumbbell snatch or at the top of a dumbbell snatch. So they just hold their breath, and that obviously tightens up their back because they're not breathing into any areas or letting their abdomen have any kind of rest. So I think managing your breathing period. And then in terms of the burpees, unfortunately, if you're big and you're tall, there's no hiding it. Your displacement doesn't change. You just have to manage the start. And then, turn it on when you can turn it on.
Yeah, I remember Gus saying to me, and like I think we done this workout like together, and it was always with me and burpee box jump overs in particular. He was just like, or burpees in general, rest at the top and literally drop and bounce. Because the thing is, bouncing off the floor is just so much easier, less energy and everything. It was just a much better movement. As you say, you can't hide from being a big athlete. So, and if you weigh a little bit more and you might be inefficient with your body weight, it's a terrible movement. Do you know who I can't wait to see is Zach George? See him do this because he's an absolute animal, and doing a workout like this he should fly through this.
Yeah, it's interesting to see also cycle time with the dumbbell snatch. Some people can really cycle it, and it might be good for them to be able to cycle it fast and then actually have a little rest, as opposed to actually trying to like muscle endure because they can't breathe well through it. So for them, actually, that might work really well. And you got to think about this. If it's a 10-minute workout because you're elite or, sub-elite and it's 12 to 15, that's a different thought process to going up to 20 because you can't hang on for 20, right? Whereas if you're, bloody Medeiros, right, 10 minutes is not a sprint, but for a CrossFit, it's pretty sprinty. So it's just a different type of energy system in their minds. And so you got to watch other people do it. And for some people, you're like, that's a 1RM snatch workout. Like it's a really heavy snatch, and therefore that's what their limiter is, and it will look like this. And this is a burpee conditioning workout because getting down and up off the ground and doing 75 burpee box jumpers is tiring. So you just have to think, where do I sit in this realm and how do I survive? Because it is a no hiding workout, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. On the snatches, something I wanted to say for obviously the bigger athletes have an advantage and they can chuck that 22.5 kilo dumbbell around more easily. But one thing that I always like to highlight is the options you have in technique. For if your lower back is blowing out, having that more upright, squatty pull from the floor. And that's one of the differences between Medeiros and Quant, was that Medeiros did use a little bit more leg drive. He's a little bit more upright to save that lower back. And it's a nice trick to have up your sleeve if you want to, or if your lower back is blowing out too much, do a set, do a few reps with more leg drive. It's not quite as fast, but in the long run, it might end up being faster as an overall.
Totally,
strategy.
and you might have to press more in the burpee so you don't extend as much, right? And use your arms more to just mitigate. And that's the thing, you got to learn on the fly. Unless you've done the workout before, you've actually got to try and be in tune, like you say, to your body. Have movement options. Like when people get injured, often they only have one movement style. Like they only have one squat pattern. And then when they load that heavy and they hit that clean, that's all they had because their foot landed a bit wide or they didn't have enough time. And then all of a sudden they injured themselves because their foot couldn't move or their knee got pulled in, because they can only squat once. So if they don't land perfectly, they have no strength in, any movement variation.
Yeah, you tend to see as well, normally when someone only has one movement pattern, it will be they do that one and then it's then there's a worse version of that. Like there isn't then, I've now got option B, I've got option C. It's just right, bang, that's all it is, and it's just going to deteriorate as the workout goes on.
Awesome. So I think that's a 21.2 well covered there. What did you think of 21.1, Jamie? Woolworths.
So I thought it was really cool that they picked, and I don't think it was a coincidence, but it was inclusive and COVID friendly because they wanted people to sign up to the Open. And I think if anyone was on the fence, they kind of got pushed towards it. I know people who actually weren't signed up and then they saw it and they were like, why not? Let's just sign up and see. Which is an interesting dynamic, and it's money for them. You know, they upped the price. I don't know if they've upped it recently, but it used to be 10, but now it's 20. And put it this way, for 3 workouts, right? So actually they're giving less, but taking the same, if not more than in previous things, which for a business is really smart. And you need less equipment, and they're offering a non-equipment, version. So that was cool. There was some really interesting little things. I don't know if you saw, but like Froning used a wall that was like ridged, right?
Oh, really?
And I think it really helped him because he was able to like climb, but then slide much smoother. So I've seen those walls. I think CrossFit Central London used to have them. But also US ones definitely do. And then Brent Fikowski, if you saw, he used like a gymnastic soft mat underneath so he could drop even harder. So it's things like that which annoy me about the Open because there is no rule against it. But it's smart because I get to see. It was like when Camille used that gymnastics bar to do the chest to bar overhead squat workout. And she got the world record. And all it does, that bar just basically moves a little bit. And if you're good at kipping, it gives you force back. It's like an Olympic barbell. Yeah. If you get someone to snatch with a powerlifting bar versus an Olympic barbell, it's like 10, 15, 20 kilos if you're at a decent level, or potentially way more because of that whip. Yeah. So I love it, but I don't love it, is my answer. The other thing which is interesting, when everyone's like, expect the unexpected with the Open, the judges course of this year's Open did not include wall walks as a standard. So just think about that for a second. You've asked people to have a new movement and it's never been practiced or spoken about. So it's cool that people are like, you should be doing wall walks. Great accessory workout. They're a regression. It's cool to put a regression in as a standard for a workout. But in terms of actual execution, how you can't include that in the judges course just baffles me. Like, it actually baffles me. Anyway, that's just kind of my loves and hates of the Open. I would be the kind of person who'd be like, sweet, now's a chance to basically get a hot above the leaderboard with all of my athletes and myself without doing anything. We're just using our brains to be like, okay, how can we do this? How can we ensure, is it better to have a perspex wall or have a serrated wall? Like, is it better to be elevated or not to be elevated? Do I need to chalk the wall? Does chalking the wall actually help anything? Should I wear shoes? If I don't wear shoes, does it make it easier? Do I have to wear shoes? Does the Open tell me that I have to, all of these things are fun because I think they're gamesmanship and whatever. But in terms of an elite test of fittest person in the world, probably not my choice of, workout to do. And I think that was one of the issues I had, is that I haven't checked the scores. I'm not, that into all of it right now, but I'm sure we've got a lot of closeness within scores. And because wall walks take, between 6 to 10 seconds, if you're stuck on a wall walk, you could have 1,000 people on that score, but that person could be 4 seconds ahead. Because there's no score there, there's no separation. You get to the double unders. I bet you having one double under after the end of a wall walk separated you by thousands. Like thousands. Because to be able to finish the wall walk, place the hands, stand back up, jump and double skip is a lot of time. But that would earn you a big spot. But if you were before, you could literally just have finished the wall walk and you could literally be the other person who's just about to hit their double under and trip and have the same score. So I don't think in terms of a scoring system, it was very good because things are too close. Whereas this workout, no surprise, is going to split the field. A bit unfair because I think the smaller athlete, once again, potentially benefits. Well, actually, it definitely does benefit. I'm not going to try and play the difference. So it's going to pack the smaller athletes. So my guess, to kind of move on a little bit, of 21.3, and it's going to be thruster chest to bar. Like, it feels like it has to be, right? Yeah. So maybe a heavier thruster even, right? I wrote down a prediction that they might repeat, because they've never done the double repeat, which would be like you'll never expect, but we can repeat 2 workouts as like a thing. If they do the 13.5, which was when Khalipa and Froning did it, and it was 4-minute window, heavy thruster, like 52 kgs, 115 pounds, and then 15 chest to bars, 3 rounds within 4 minutes, which if you've ever tried is almost impossible for an average CrossFitter to try and do, or an average good CrossFitter. So I don't know. If they make the thruster bar heavier, then I think it would obviously equalize a bit of the heavier guys and stronger guys. If they made it a 60 kilo thruster and chest to bars, or even like a 60, well, it'd have to be chest to bars. If they went bar muscle up, it'd be quite aggressive. And then
Yeah,
the
and a lot
taller
of people
athlete
can't do it
might
at
not
home.
benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
true.
it'll exclude
Yeah,
it.
with height. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of my guess for the next one. It feels like it's kind of built for that.
Yeah, there always has to be a form of thruster, doesn't it? It's like everyone's dreaded movement. Just a quick thing on the 21.1 with the wall walk. So again, I'm pretty similar to you. Is I know what's going on, but I'm not fully invested in it at the moment. But some of the techniques I saw with the wall walk, so people literally walking up and literally like body slamming the floor, like.
Yeah.
That is not a wall walk. I that's half a wall walk, because I know they're not doing it for skill, right? I know they're not doing it for the gymnastic benefits and stuff like that. But literally, I like that. For me, that's a hard thing to say. That's a wall walk, but I don't know. That's just me sitting on the fence and being like, oh, that shouldn't be how it's done.
Yeah, well, I think that's a key point about the Open, is that it's competitive. It's not for a training stimulus.
Yeah, no.
So people are just going to work within the movement standards to work as quickly and efficiently as possible. And it goes back to what we were saying in one of our very early podcasts around what's the reason that you're doing this exercise. And if it's to get your reps done as quickly as you can, using as little energy as you can, it's a very different technique to get maximum training benefit out of it. And yeah, it was quite funny seeing a lot of the body slams.
It's like I'm not saying it's wrong, because I get it, and I think I've been part of that thing. You're trying to get the most out of it. It's just as an exercise. I guess you're doing it whatever it takes to get your top score. So, and as you say, if you're within the movement standards, then that's all that counts.
So that's the game. So I think that's a good point, actually, to transition on to the new format, Jamie. Obviously, it's a different scoring style this year in terms of just qualifying for the quarterfinals by being in the top 10% of finishers of the Open. So all the top guys are talking about it, basically saying it's a completely different game now, because you don't have to finish top in your country. The pressure is kind of off the Open. And I think Quant said it today that because it's so different, he's a lot more comfortable peaking later. Exactly. So he's actually a bit out of shape now, and he's going to get fitter later in the year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think firstly, this is also not new. It's a joke that we've had regionals, sanctionals, and then now continentals. I think it's now the thing. So just expect the unexpected. And I think for the long-term future of the sport, we need to stick to something. I'm not saying I know what is and what it should be. I don't at all. But in terms of people planning, I know people who used to move, and I was in Asia, and people would move to Asia just so they could qualify out of Asia, and hence why they decided to change it to passport and resident and blah, 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 blah. So they have to stick to it. I think it's really cool that it's 3 weeks for the average person, because 5 weeks is really long. For a gym to organize is really long. It's really hard to fit that in, to judge people. I mean, what it's like to work and then try and do those workouts. I found those 5 weeks one of the most stressful 5 weeks of the year. Exciting, so much fun, community. Then you do like drinks and food afterwards and but at 5 weeks, most people don't finish the last workout. They're mostly injured or just too tired from doing it. So that kind of speaks volumes. I think, once again, a great way to make more money, because you pay, I think, $50 if I'm right. Yes, for the next phase. So they've got $70 for 10% of whatever, 20,000 people. If 200,000 people sign up, similar. It might be less because of COVID, but just think about that as a business. Smart. But $50 for a weekend of workouts online, pretty expensive. I'm not going to lie. They're not giving you anything. Is what it is. I think the next phase, once COVID has hopefully left us, will be great, because essentially what it's going to be like is a bit like your elite, semi-elite CrossFitters that do their own little regionals in their own gym. So I think it'll be great. And it's a weekend. Instead of being 3 more weeks, it's a weekend. So it's really going to reward people that are actually really resilient and actually really good at executing workouts, because you don't have time. You can. If the elite guys, if they mess up, they can just do it again and the volume won't probably hurt them. But you have to do all the workouts every weekend. And how cool would that be? Like your kind of top guys, you can join in. The guys can pick and choose, and you can adapt the workouts. But you've got guys that are doing it, and women, sorry, I just mean guys and people, doing it all together one weekend. I think that's really cool. And the buzz that will create, I think, is a really smart idea. And then you can tell by the equipment that's needed, rope, rings, GHD, I believe, et cetera, et cetera. exactly. There's going to be much more movement variation and movements in there, which I think will create a much better pool of athletes. So that kind of stage 1, stage 2, I kind of like, but I think it's smart from them to do that. And it also means that you can actually prep people for the Open properly, because now we know that a muscle up is unlikely to come up in the first 3 weeks. We know that high volume, probably chest to bars might be once, but it's not going to be chest to bars and toes to bars, and handstand push-ups to like eliminate your people who can't do gymnastics as a big limiter. They're probably not going to put a super heavy barbell in there because they said standard weights, but that could be 150. But kind of, I like that. And then the next phase is going to be the opposite. So if you're a big athlete, if you got through, you're probably going to do really well in the next phase because they're going to be heavier movements, bigger movements. The next part is kind of a bit more confusing for me. I had to go through Bosman's presentation, which bothered me because the information is hard to get. So I love the last chance qualifier. So just to like put people up to speed, there's going to be quarterfinals all over the world. Semi-finals all over the world. And then depending on where you are, X amount of people go to create 38 athletes. And then there's going to be a last qualifier. So if you're the top three that didn't qualify in each of those little sections, continentals, you then go into a last chance qualifier to see if you can get in. I like that because before in regionals, and they did the same workouts, you saw people do so well, but just because they were in some regions, like Panchik's and Froning's regions, they didn't qualify. You put the exact same scores into another region, and they would have gone easily. They could have won other regions, right? So I love that. The fact that it's only 2 really upsets me, right? So 2 out of that last chance is just not enough, to be fair, because and the anomalies could be out there, and it needs to be more. So we went from the last games that was in person, having 1 athlete from each part of the country in the whole world, right? That's what we went from. And now we've gone from half the field will be American. 20 out of 40 minimum will be American, right? I'm not saying that that's not fair on the sport or fitness, but it's shown that they are no longer going for the world because they had 200 plus athletes show up, I can't remember what it was, and have to do that rope climb, running, snatch workout, right? Yeah. And everyone carrying their flags, to now being like, oh, okay, so including Europe, 3/4 of the field will be European or American. 3/4 of the whole field at the games. And that's not including the last 2 qualifiers. It can be 32 out of 40. It could be Europe and American. So I don't love how that has represented the world because I don't think it's fair and easy. If they made the last chance qualifier 5 people, I think that's at least more fair to allow people who are in, like, I think if you're in Africa, it's the first person that goes. Then it's the bottom 3 that obviously go into the last chance qualifier. But those 3, even if they're the best, they can't qualify. So I know it's unlikely to happen, but if you had those 3 people from that region actually be the best and get first, second, third in that last chance qualifier, that last African athlete will not go. So how is they haven't thought about that, in my opinion, to actually fairly represent the world. So that's that. I think that's all of my ranting.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
So I think there's a few things going on. The biggest bugbear also out that I have is that there's no consistent programming. So they're allowing different events to hold your semi-finals. So I think Wadapalooza might be doing, I actually don't know, but lots of them, Torian's doing the one in Oceania, just because I know, because I follow Ant. And it's whoever's buddies with CrossFit still. Because I'm pretty sure, I'm almost certain, Strength and Depth is not in that one. Really? Right? So Sid didn't qualify to have the Continental. And the programming is it's going to be overseen by CrossFit, but the programming is up to whoever's running that event. So I think that's a big issue. Ooh. Exactly.
Because like Dubai, they went completely and I know they had an issue with Dubai, didn't they? Is Dubai a qualifying place? Will they just be able to buy their spot basically?
Off the top of my head, I don't think the Dubai Championship is on there.
I remember there being the thing of there's we can program better, and there was they backed themselves, which was great, but they backed themselves so much, and cause again they had all the money, they was able to literally do everything, and they had all the athletes, so it was a mini games.
I think Dubai said no, and they're going to run obviously the biggest event outside of the games. and they're planning to do an off-season event. I don't know that for sure, but obviously we can just have a little look and check. But if you look at the events, you'd be surprised. Some of the events you never heard of, because that's what CrossFit decide is what they're holding. And I get the idea of flexibility within programming, because if you're Dubai and you can do a sand dune run, great test of fitness, but other events can't do that. Fair. But if you're going to have 7 events, you could be, of 4 events, it's going to be 1 heavy lift between snatch and clean and jerk, all variations of hand power snatch, squat clean, whatever you want to do, jerk off a rack. You could do 1, female orientated workout that you have to do, like a Jackie followed by Grace followed by Fran, whatever you want to do, right? And you could create some consistency and then allow others to be like, oh, we've got high ropes, we can do high rope climbs, we've got a huge lane for people to handstand walk, and then they can do, whatever. We have so much more budget to have everyone can have an assault bike and a pegboard, whatever you want to do. I love that concept, but there has to be some, in my opinion, standardization across the continents for it to be a fair reflection of the games. Their argument will be there's a last chance qualifier. So if you're upset with the programming and upset with your field that we selected you to go against, go into the last chance qualifier. But I'm like, that's 2 out of, I can't remember the maths, but it'll probably be 2 out of 35, more actually. I think it's like 2 out of 60 that are going to go anyway.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my rant on that.
Well, it's the classic CrossFit conundrum, isn't it? That it should be a surprising and unexpected test of fitness, but for consistency and fairness, there should be some repeatable things. But then they don't want to be decathlon, so they need to mix it up and keep it fresh. But then the discussion around fairness as to if somebody gets tested this way in America and somebody gets tested that way in Africa, then you can't make an objective comparison of their fitness. And
but just on that, I've just from my perspective, especially like using Dubai as an example with like the sand dune run, is like you might not be able to replicate that anywhere else. But don't enter the competition then if you're crap at sand dune running, or if you don't want to have to do that. Because it's like, that's the thing. It's like, just like all of these sanctionals and stuff like that. Like in London, you're not going to have an ocean swim. So if you're shit at swimming in the ocean, don't go to, like, do you know what I mean? You'd go to London and make sure you don't, because you might at the most have a swim in a bloody like river or something at the most. So it's like, you'd pick a sanctional based on your strengths if you know there's going to be things that are, as you say, the outliers. So
they already have issues, because the call that I watched, right, Sam Briggs was on. I think Emma McQuaid might have been on too, and they both asked, because I think definitely Sam Briggs, she's based out of the US right now, and she comes back to the UK, whatever. But then she was like, but if I get put into a sanctional, will that be in Europe? And they're like, well, yeah, because you're qualifying out of Europe. And they were like, well, what if COVID won't allow me to travel, yada yada? And they were like, well, then you can do the last chance qualifier, and that's a COVID way of doing it. And I'm like, whoa, like that's a big change. And also, even in America, because there's 4 in America, right? 4. They aren't going to just split it by where you are geographically, because equally, they're still going to have some kind of ranking system, because they don't want all the good athletes going to one event and taking all those spots and then these be weaker. So there's a subjectiveness in terms of what that looks like. I assume they're going to base it on the second part, the quarterfinal scores, and not the first part. I'm not sure of that, but I hope the first 3 workouts they do, they clear the leaderboard, because they're not fair, in my opinion, workouts to then rank the top guys and girls, women, into your pools correctly. So it is very complicated, in my opinion. And Australia, they were like, look, if I'm in Australia, but I have an American, passport, I can't come back to the US. I don't want to. Can't do quarantine. I can't get back into the country. I work here. My kids are here. And they were like, well, that's your choice. Or you can do the last chance qualifier. And I was like, I'm glad that they're being hard on it, because it's clear. But at the same point, I'm like, I'm not sure the longevity of this model is going to work. But they're going to have to learn. Glassman's out, new structure, new thought process. So I'm sure they will. But I can't say that I'm sparked with joy.
I do think
some of the decisions. I
do think that, like if you talk going back to the one where you had like the whole world going to the event and stuff like that, they realized that they fucked up there. Like they realized it was just too much. And then obviously then I think it was thankful that they then had COVID essentially to kind of like keep that at bay, because I was like, that was just too much to handle. And as I said, you're then losing high end athletes. In which they did say, at the end of the day, if you're a high-end athlete, you should rise to the top anyway. So it's like there was a lot of debate on that, but I think as you say, you just got to go with this, because even this year is going to be a testing year, and you just got, if you're a part of the elite, then you'll rise to the top, as they say. So it doesn't matter what area you are or anything. It's just what it is.
For me, the biggest issue with all of that stuff, and even if it is now, as I've kind of alluded to, is the scoring system. I think the scoring system is so broken that not broken. It's so variable to the field. So someone like Brent Fikowski, and when you've only got 3 rope climbs and they're extra high, if you miss 1 rep, but your field is 5, like it was at the games, it doesn't matter. Right? You can place last in that workout and still win the games. But if your field is 200 and you miss a rep that is a minute, then actually there's no way for you to catch up. And to think that the way to win the games is based on other people just isn't a fair reflection if you're going to create cuts. Because the same thing, once you cut a certain field, relative to the amount of tests, that field is different. So there are some athletes I know, because of the cuts, they did really well because they snuck in, but then they got rid of the strong people. That was the big argument of the last game with the cuts. Loads of the strong people went out because there was a whole bunch of gymnastics and body weight movements early on. The cream of the crop, the top 5 is still the top 5. I agree with that. And the top 10 are probably still the top 10. But it means that the separator between the scores don't exist because all of your strong guys didn't make it through. And yes, they weren't going to win the games, but it meant that Matt Fraser and Noah Olsen, who are both small, were always going to fly ahead, and it was going to create an exciting race because there's no separation. Like, it was impossible by the last workout with only 10 people in the field to create enough separation for someone to really like throw in and win. But if you had more people in that last workout, even the people in the first heat are trying to knock Matt Fraser off because they know if they create some separation and go fast, then there might be enough of a gap for someone else to beat him. So the scoring system is the thing that I think is the one that suffers, right? Because of the variability in athletes and skills and tests, right? If they create a better scoring system, the tests would still have to be decent, but they could create relative scores, right? Anyway.
No, I think it's a really good point. Like, it's if you come first in an early round or you come first in the later round when there's only a few people left, it's a completely different thing. And or if you come 5th, it's a very, very different thing because there's either 4 people or whatever, 195 after you. And
and I want to watch Matt Fraser win by 10 minutes. Like, what's the point in him even going any faster? It was just gamesmanship, and everyone's like, oh, he's such a great guy because he's still pushing to the end. I'm like, no, if I was Matt Fraser, to be honest, I would slow down and win by a second. But he's so confident that he doesn't need to. But there's no benefit in him going faster. Whereas if he was like every second is a percentage further away from the next place and I got a percentage more of points, how cool would that be? Like, watching Matt Fraser like just go and actually see that his scores will never be beat for 2 decades would be really cool. But they've missed the chance on that because, like you say, if it was like decathlon, there would be. It doesn't matter if the field is going bad. You've got multiple averages and multiple ways of calculating your scores so that if you are just good at high jump in this round, it doesn't matter if you just won. If you win by half a meter, you get loads, exponentially more points, right?
Yeah. Well, what would be the downside of making it standardized? Because I remember the functional fitness racing thing came about and they had a standard set of events that had to be at every competition. Is it just too boring?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a boring aspect to it. I definitely think that then it becomes more about diligency and training and just being really good at finding ways to just win those tests, which I don't think is great. And I guess it takes away the kind of funness of what CrossFit kind of means to so many people. So I totally appreciate that. It is a hard balance for sure. But even if they just said there's going to be 3 tests every year that they stay the same out of 30, like that's good enough for me.
So I personally think that I think having a standard test like, say, a 2K row, or even like going into like one of the girls' workouts, like, making sure every single year, like when they were doing Murph, is in like that's like a nice test every year. You can see how good is your 2K row, how deep can you go, and you're going to start to see some elite times. You then obviously got Murph, which again is a great test of just all round conditioning and body weight endurance, and then and like they always do, they have a 1 rep max test of some sort. So there is that little bit of standardized. It might not be the same movement, but everyone knows they're going to have to lift a heavy barbell at one point on the weekend or however long the games are.
Yeah. That's a very good point. All right, let's move on to something else, Jamie. Like, for the listeners' benefit, what are the key lessons that you've learned from your experience, both coaching and as an athlete during the Open?
Yeah, I think I'll probably circle back to this point, but it is really knowing why you're doing the Open is the biggest thing. If you're doing it for fun, then firstly, make sure you're having fun. If you're not having fun, then just reconsider why you're not having fun and why you're finding it so difficult. Know, are you competing against yourself? Are you competing against your best mate? Are you competing against the world? I think I did 4 Opens seriously where I, repeated my workouts, judges, filmed my workouts. And I think I went from like maybe it was like 8,000 in the world. I can't remember. No, much higher, like 20,000 in the world to like 10 to 4 to whatever it may be. And I wanted to see my, things improve in the world. That was one of the things that I had. And I used it as a training test. So regardless of the variability of the test, I was like, we're treating this, Max and I, we're treating this like a battery of tests. So it's not that I'm doing it and then ignoring the scores and seeing where they lie. It's actually being like, okay, this counts as I'm periodizing towards it. I was very lucky to go on a team at regionals afterwards. So it gave me a lot of purpose. Those 2 years where we went on a regional team, it was so easy to repeat the workouts because I was like, I want to go to regionals. Like it was because my why was so clear. It then became afterwards, and I think, Ash was in the same gym when I was doing it in my last year, much harder to kind of know why I was doing it. Because I was one of the better athletes in the gym. And at one point, people were trying to almost inspire me with my why to be like, are you going to beat this person? Are you going to do this? And it became so chaotic and difficult for me to enjoy it. And hence why I stopped, because I lost my why of why I was doing it. And when you are, and the people doing the workout coming up, into your snatches and breathing through your eyes, and you're like feeling like you're going to throw up, and your lower back feels like it's going to come out your spine. If you don't know why you're doing it, you will stop, right? You will just stop subconsciously. You would just be like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Like, why am I putting myself through it? If you're like, this is for me to like prove to myself that I have the mental resilience to complete anything, then do that. But realize that's not based on the score. That's based on you having this really positive experience from pushing through something that was difficult. So if you're able to do that, you need to just pat yourself on the back. If you're like, I want to do better in the world, whatever, then, be included in that. But realize that everyone else also wants to be better. So that's a really difficult thing to place your hopes on, because you're placing your hopes on other people probably improving at a slightly less rate than what you're improving at. You probably are improving, right? But who knows if it's higher or lower than your average rate. So that's probably my first thing, which is quite a deep one. The second one, in terms of practical stuff, I would just say that people need to think about their recovery between the workouts. This was much more important when it was 5 weeks. But when it's 3 weeks, just make sure if you're going that bit harder, that you're doing that bit more to recover, whether that be an extra 5-minute cool down, an extra 20-minute stretch session, extra 30 minutes of sleep. Just give yourself the best possible chance to try and feel good and maximize your recovery. The other thing is just practice your skills. So like the wall walk was a classic one. You should be practicing that wall walk. Once you saw the thing go out, go outside, or your double unders. Just practice those skills and allow yourself to set yourself well up for success. And then just cheat by watching people do the workout. People used to get really frustrated with me because I wouldn't go first because I wanted to do the best. So I want to watch that person and be like, okay, they roughly beat me in this workout, blah, 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 and that was their score, blah, 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 blah. And it is gamesmanship. But if you want to do well, then watch people. Go online, watch a video, watch how they do it, watch how they move, watch if they triple on their double unders, watch how they set up their rope, watch, anything you want to, whether they adjust their box, do they turn around? Oh, it's an uneven amount of burpee box jump overs. You're going to be on, this side when you finish and when you end. Like, all the stuff just comes from just being a bit more aware and just having experience. And like I said, I'm a coach, or I've seen it happen. I learned so much, and we learned so much from working with people, from trying to learn from other people's mistakes. And that's it. The other one that I said, which is a bit of gamesmanship too, is that like the double under workout, it doesn't work if you're in a group. If you want the best score, if you trip for the first 3 double unders, restart the bloody clock. Like your best score is trying to be, calm and whatever. If you've started the workout and it's been 30 seconds and you've tripped 3 times, then you probably should just be like, do you know what? 3-minute rest, do it again. Obviously, you've got to commit to a certain point and say to yourself, when am I going to go for it? But if you're so frustrated that you've started poorly, there's no, the game is the best 15, 20 minutes that you have. So set yourself up for the best 15, 20 minutes. And then once you start, just commit to whatever you're doing and just go for it. And I'm so much about strategy, but ultimately live and die by your own sword. You'd rather fall on your own sword. So if you want to go 150 double unders unbroken, then just go 150 double unders unbroken. I wouldn't recommend it, but at least then you learn, and hopefully as part of your open journey, you want to learn something. You want to learn something about yourself, about the workout, about your fitness.
Do you know, I think your point of your whys into why you do it is so key, because I think as three of us coaching classes and seeing, so, you know, your average Joe trying to do the best they can, and then they're trying to game the system by, you know, like doing one ring muscle up just to get ahead of these people. And then you're like, but why? Like, you're trying to beat people in the world, beat people in the gym that are on your level. And it's like, then they're risking injury, but it's like, it's trying to get that through. And we've all been there. Like, I remember doing the same, trying to get a couple of ring muscle-ups. So I knew I had one. So how many dodgy singles? So we've all been at that stage. So I remember that. But it really is that importance of knowing why you're doing it, so you can compete against the right people. Because then when you said about watching other people, don't watch the pros do the workout and think, right, this is how I'm going to split this up. Because again, how they're breaking it up is going to be so different to how you're going to break it up. It's a good, say, starting place, but then you can start saying, okay, cool. Can I do a set of, say, 50 unbroken double unders consistently all the time? Then, okay, maybe you can't, so maybe you have to drop down. But even if you do drop down to, say, 25, like the amount of time having a quick rest and starting again really isn't that much time. And it's like, even a trip, like you see the pros trip, like they just do it. It's like, if you stay calm and collect, you can just start again straight away and you're not like stressing. And that's the difference, obviously, when you're talking about high-end athletes compared to like your average average CrossFit athletes.
Yeah. Well, it moves us on nicely. Sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
I was just going to say, with that double under thing, I actually said to Morgan, you know, my best mate, he's new-ish to CrossFit. And all I said to him as a strategy, firstly, it was going to be a double under workout. It doesn't have double unders that well, right? But I said, either you go for 10 to 15 unbroken and then rest, or 5 attempts and then rest. Doesn't matter, whichever comes first. Because you know when you get fatigued and you're breathing, like if you keep going, you just get more frustrated. Your shoulders come more forward. Everything becomes harder. So you're either like, if I hit 15 unbroken, then I rest for 10 seconds. Or if I hit 5 attempts and I don't get past 15, I stop anyway. Regather myself. You can do it on the time, or you can do it by breaths. If you're someone who wants to stay internal, I'm going to take 5 breaths, 3 breaths, 8 breaths, whatever. If you're external, it can be like 10 seconds on the clock, 15. And then I'm going to attempt either 5 or 15 unbroken double unders. Like that to me is a great strategy that is flexible, as opposed to, oh, it's going to be easy. I'll do 20 unbroken, take this, and then it all starts going wrong. And I'm like, what? Remember, why are we trying to do this? If you want to try and test yourself, then think about your strategy, how you're going to do it. Like you said, if you can't do 50 unbroken fresh, you're probably not going to do 25 unbroken tired. Like it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, spot on. Well, I guess that moves us on nicely to our next section. What are the common pitfalls? Maybe break them down by beginners and elite for the typical traps that people fall into.
Yeah, this is quite, it's quite difficult to split in my mind when I was trying to think about some of these things. But I think overall, and these 2 workouts are going to show it, I think people try and do too much CrossFit in training. And they know that. And the first workout is a classic one where people are like, if you have done enough to warrant doing CrossFit, when you do a CrossFit Open workout, you will feel your lungs and you will feel like you've got a really good workout in. If you do a CrossFit workout, open workout, and you're like, oh, I couldn't get there. Or I know it wasn't my breathing that was limited. I just couldn't do double unders. Oh, my shoulders were just so fatigued. It was like local muscle endurance in my shoulders. That to me tells me that in your training, you need to be doing more structured, linear stuff to build that up away from fatigue. Because when you put it together, it doesn't even create the same fatigue that it would do if you were proficient at those movements separately. So if you are someone who can't do enough double unders that you're stopping because you're tired, you shouldn't be pairing double unders with anything apart from maybe like an assault bike or maybe a rower or, something that is monostructural that doesn't create other fatigue. Because if you do, the skill is going to break down and you're not going to really be working on anything else. You're just going to be stopping because you can't carry on. But if you're good at double unders, you'll watch people go shh, and stop, and they're like, and that could be a breathing thing you need to work on, but they're actually stopping because nothing's breaking down. They're physically tired, so they can't do it anymore, right? So I think that's really important to think. If you're someone who does CrossFit Open workouts and you're like, oh, it just isn't that hard, or I just can't, carry on because the skill breaks down, or I can't do a muscle up, then you don't do the muscle up workout to get better at muscle ups. You've got to get better at whatever, strict pulling, scapular control, bent arm strength, kipping work, skill work, whatever it may be. So I think that's really important just to think about in terms of training. In terms of actually when you're doing the open workouts, and we spoke about it, and Ash and I have spoken about it lots in the past, but the strategy that you have for you is so important. And I think it's going to be like a pull-up or a chest-to-bar workout. But if you don't know what your max reps are for certain things, just go and figure those out. What's your max unbroken keeping chest to bars? What's your max unbroken handstand push-ups? What's your max? And you should know these if you're going to compete. Even if you're competing at a low level, you should know them. So when they come up in a workout, you're like, great, if that's my max or what I can do steadily on an EMOM, how am I going to break this down so I don't get to end range fatigue when you're standing there watching people like under a pull-up and going, "Ugh," and like just clearing their chin and then resting for 15 seconds and going, "Ugh," right? We never want to get to that point. And if you are to that point, then make sure it's at the end of the workout, right? That's absolutely fine. There was one workout, it was horrible, the toaster bar, double under, heavy clean workout. I was so bad at that workout. It exposed so many things for me. However, having said that, I was doing my toaster bars in singles because I knew that was better for me and still got to that 100 kilo bar, right? So it's still possible if that's how it breaks down for you. But I know that happens for me. When we did that chest and ascending snatch ladder one, I was doing my chest to bars in twos and singles just to save myself for the snatch. And I hit all the 84 kilo snatches because I knew those things. If I couple them, as in like hold on for unbroken sets, my forearms just blow up. And then I can't pick up the bar on the snatch. And then I start wobbling around as I stand up. And then all of a sudden it starts to break down. But, I'm very into, and I was really into that type of training. But for you, if you know roughly what you can and can't do, wall balls is a classic one. And we spoke about it before. If you don't know how many unbroken wall balls you can do or a consistent number on the minute, you should be like, if I asked you to do 10, wall balls on the minute for 10 minutes, could you do it? And if you can't tell me yes or no right now, then you're never going to have a chance of having your best Karen score. You should be like, yeah, I'll be able to do it. And I'll probably be able to do 2 or 3 more minutes without redlining. Or if I get to 7 minutes, I'll be able to hang on and just finish the 10. That's quite simple. It's just wall balls on a minute. And you've done enough training probably to know that. You just probably haven't thought about it. And then, the complexity of pairing movements, yada, yada, it becomes much more complicated.
I was remembering class being that guy that was always like, try and treat this workout like an EMOM, like that, you know what you can do, and everyone's like, shut up, I just want to go fucking balls to the wall. And it's like, I get that there is a time to go balls to the wall, but a lot of the people I'm saying it to are the guys and girls that are trying to then, when it comes to the open, do really well. And if they don't have that data, as you said, you're pissing in the wind. And it's just like it's one of those workouts, one of those things that I was always so grateful when I trained so much with Gus, because again he's exactly like that, to the point of knowing your maxes, and we'd always work off those to do EMOMs and stuff to build. And but then I'll also, just like when you said about knowing your level, one of the last open workouts I did was with Ash, and he told me how to break it up, and everyone, it was one that went to 33 thrusters and chest to bar, and I finished it, and it was like, and I finished it in a respectable time, and I broke it up based on what he said, because it was where my limiting factors were. And it was until the very end where I remember just doing it in 2 sets or whatever. It was so good, and it was such a good feeling because I hadn't just blown my load early doors and then just tried to hold on for the rest of the workout. So yeah, that is never the way. It never benefits you.
I talked about it before. Just when it's running or just a monostructural race, it's so obvious in terms of race strategy that you don't go too fast at the start and then drag yourself over the finish line. But in CrossFit, for some reason, people think that doesn't apply. The principles of physiology remain the same, in that if you go over your threshold, you've got to pay it back with interest. So you have to go so much slower later that it ends up being a net slower time. But everyone, because it's exercise, I think people think that it should be hurting and they should be suffering, otherwise they're doing it wrong. But from a competitive point of view, it should feel like obviously not easy, but you need to be able to pick it up towards the end. Otherwise, you have gone too fast too soon. And it is that simple, but people just are scared to feel like they've got more in the tank through the beginning stages of the workout.
I mean, in the perfect scenario, you'd be sprinting towards the end, and then just before the end, you're slowing down. Like, that would be perfect. Obviously, the peak would be absolutely, but like that would be. But I think what people forget is if you play too close to that line, the benefit literally exponentially goes the other way. Because if you peak 30 seconds before the end, that last 30 takes 3 minutes, right? Instead of putting 90 seconds on the front end. I think that's what people don't realize, is that if you play too close to the line, then it's not worth the risk, right? But if you're close to it, then sprint towards the end. Like you said, right, like go in 2 sets and like go for it and finish and being like, do you know what? Actually, I probably could have sprinted 5 seconds earlier. And that's a great thing to think and do. And next time you repeat it, you can do it. However, if you sprinted 30 seconds earlier, you don't know if you can make it to the end because you didn't. And you don't actually know anywhere near of when you can sprint because you're not close. You're literally doing, singles and whatever. So that, I think, is a different thing. And then, going into, it just segues into like the elite people or semi-elite, let's call it like, let's call it the 10% that are potentially going to go into the next round, right? People that can do muscle ups and handstand push-ups and handstand walking and, whatever. Then those people, I think, if you've gotten there and you've trained really, quite programmed and consistently, then actually you do need to know when you can push and sprint. Because if you're really good at handstand push-ups, for example, you might know that it's going to get uncomfortable here. But because you're, wanting to make up time somewhere else, you have to kind of go up and down a bit more and know how to kind of game that. Lots of the sprinters do that at the games. If you watch them, they almost game it so they have to go faster. That's their nature, to get ahead. They're never going to catch up at the end because their power's gone. So they have to kind of push in front and use that, cycle to just get 10 seconds in front and then pull it down. And that's the only way, because they know Matt Fraser is not going to go fast. And if you stay at his pace, you're never going to get in front of him. It was the classic strength and depth one where Cam Nichols, I watched him, we're just doing 400-meter repeats round and round. He's not fast, but bloody hell, like Olympic silver, right? So enduring, like in rowing. He decided just to go fast, but so that no one could out-sprint him at the end. He pulled away, but he never got quicker. He just kept the same speed. But if he stayed in the pack, he had this potential that someone would sit behind him and the last, lap, try and go, and he just went, I'm going to make this aerobic for me. So I'm literally going to run the same pace and just go hard for me because I can't go any harder. He's so aerobic, he actually can't go faster than that. So in his world, it was quote unquote easy, but he was gaming it. So if you're that, 10% athlete and you know that, you have to push here, you have to do that, and it has to get a bit uncomfortable, but you can recover when you row and you have to calm yourself down there and whatever, and you're tall and you're heavy, then it becomes much more complicated, but really interesting, because that's when I remember I've coached a few, medium, high level athletes where you're like, I know it sucks, but you got to push. And I know you think there's 5 minutes left of the workout, and there is, but you can do this. And it's really uncomfortable for them to get into that place because they're used to, like you say, winning workouts by being smart and just staying behind. But pushing that edge, so they're really sprinting and just dipping at the end, is, really fun, but very, very, just scary. Like scary to push someone to a point where you think they might not finish this, and that's how it should be. So they should finish it literally like fall over the line.
With nothing left. That's a really good point about Cam Nichol and the distinction between race strategy and optimal time trialing. So what we were saying before about negative splits and pacing yourself is to create the best possible time, which is the open. But as soon as you go into a race where you're alongside people, psychology and gamesmanship do come into it. So if you know your relative strengths and weaknesses, it might be better for you to actually put in a slower time but mess up somebody else. So if you are an aerobic athlete, pull away so that the sprinter uses up his sprint and has nothing left at the end. You'll both finish with suboptimal times that you could do better if you were maximizing for your personal performance. But because of the competitive environment, it messes people up. And I think the example, I think it was Kelly Holmes when she won her 800s, and she was just so disciplined to have her negative splits, and the pack was way ahead of her. But because she was an older athlete and experienced, she knew what her splits felt like, and she was comfortable enough that would ultimately result in the best time. she didn't get her feathers ruffled by everyone else jostling for position. And sure enough, like she knew they couldn't hold that speed, and then she just slowly started overtaking. I think she literally came from last to first in the last 200 meters.
Yeah, the last 200. Actually, interesting listening to a podcast of her recently talk about it, and you're exactly right there. And it's great in an 800 or a 1005 or whatever, because you can see the clock. And obviously in CrossFit, there's so many variables and you don't know. But she genuinely was like, these women, if they hold on to this pace, will be running a world record. And I know they can't do that. Like, she was so confident to be like, I just have to deal with this pain and hold on for another 400. And I'm feeling, I think Haile Gebrselassie said it. He said, if I'm feeling this pain, they're feeling worse. That's what he used to say to himself, to be like, I've got to make this more painful, because if I can tolerate it, they can't. And knowing that those splits are there, like you say, it's like almost inspiring, because you're like, there's no way you're going to hold. And I remember I've done workouts where we did these sectionals in Asia where we were split up, and we had the workouts 3 weeks in advance. So I've done these workouts like 4 times, and I was genuinely doing it. I looked at the clock and I was like 30 seconds faster than training. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm pumped. I'm peaked. This is all right. But then I look around, everyone else is in front of me. And I'm like, okay, this is fine. Either they're going to completely smoke me, which I'm fine with, because I'm going 30 seconds faster. And with like 2 minutes into a workout, right, I'm really excited. And then sure enough, I literally go from last. And in the last movement, it were bar muscle ups. I was, second to last and then one, right? And that for me was the big validation way back when, that you've just got to stay in your world, know how it feels. It's the feeling that you have to understand, to be like, am I tipping over the edge? If so, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you got to come down.
Matt Fraser said that, didn't he, in like the documentary? We touched on it a couple of weeks back, I think, and he said like when he goes out into like the final workout, something like that, is just he goes onto the floor, he's not looking at everyone else, he's just focused on the task at hand that he has to do, because he cannot control everyone else's capacity. So he's just got to do what he can and know that that's going to be enough to win. And don't get me wrong, if he's then getting right towards the end, he might then have to step it up, because maybe he pace it a little bit too much, but then he knows he's got more left in the tank, because he's gone at that kind of pace that he's able to then unlock that last little bit of potential to dominate, which he obviously did multiple years in a row.
Amazing. I think we could probably talk about the Open for another hour, but I'm afraid we're up on time. So just want to say thanks again, Jamie, for your time. It's been a really fun chat, and looking forward to seeing what comes out for 21.3 and the rest of the season. So where can people find out more about you, Jamie?
I am on Instagram. I'm Lau, LAUJKB. I'm also the founder of The Training Lab, so that's ttlab.co.uk. But yeah, if you want to chat, just send me a message. Thanks for having me on. It's been a fun chat. Like you say, we could probably talk forever and rant forever about CrossFit, but it is great. I think it's so cool to see so many people passionate about exercise and training. So that's just the amazing part of the Open for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks very much, guys. As always, we are very grateful to be sponsored by Wit Fitness. Please check them out at www.wit-fitness.com and use discount code LL15 to get your lunge and lift discount. Thanks for your time, guys, and we look forward to speaking with you next week.
Cheers.